Welcome back, everyone. Today we're taking a deep dive into the fascinating world of Tulsidas.
A pivotal figure in Indian spirituality and literature.
Absolutely. You might know him as the author of the epic Ramcharitmanas.
But his story goes far beyond that single work.
There's so much more to uncover. For instance, did you know he wasn't always known as Tulsidas?
That's right. He was born Rampola.
And that name change, well, it hints at a really profound shift in his life.
It really does. His life was marked by an incredible devotion to Lord Rama. And you can see it reflected in his writings and in how he became known as Tulsidas,
Meaning,
servant of Tulsi.
and that symbolizes.
Devotion to Lord Vishnu.
Fascinating. So let's start with some basics. Who was Tulsidas? What was his life like?
Well, he was born in the 16th century in Rajapur, Uttar Pradesh. But his early life, it was, well, full of challenges.
In what way?
He was abandoned as a child
Oh, wow.
and raised by a saint named Naharidas.
You know, it's almost as if these hardships, they kind of pushed him toward this deeper spiritual connection.
I think that's a really insightful observation. It seems like those early experiences really shaped his path and ultimately led to his deep devotion to Lord Rama.
And this is where his masterpiece, Ramcharitmanas, comes in. It's more than just a retelling of the Ramayana, right?
You're absolutely right. It's not just a story. It's a spiritual guide for millions, even today.
Wow.
And it's interesting to consider that he chose to write it in Awadhi, the common language of the people.
Ah, instead of the Sanskrit of the original Ramayana. Why do you think he made that choice? Was it to make the story more accessible? Or was there something more to it?
It was definitely groundbreaking. Imagine the impact, translating this complex religious text from the language of scholars and priests into the everyday language of the people.
Making it accessible to a far wider audience, almost like democratizing spiritual knowledge.
Exactly. It challenged the existing power structures of the time.
Wow. So it was almost a revolutionary act. Not just storytelling, but a way to empower people through knowledge and through spirituality.
Precisely, and he did this through these beautiful verses called chopé and dohas.
Specific poetic forms.
Yes, they give a unique rhythm and structure to Ramcharitmanas, making it both engaging and memorable.
Could you give us an example of one of these verses? One that really embodies Tulsidas' central message?
Sure. One that comes to mind is Ram Nam Ke Punya Hai, Ram Nam Ke Data, Ram Nam Se Bardhan, Ram Nam Suktata.
Which translates to,
The name of Rama is virtue. The name of Rama is the giver. There is no greater wealth than the name of Rama. The name of Rama is the giver of happiness.
that's beautiful. It really speaks to the simplicity and power of his message. Finding peace and liberation through devotion to Rama. This sounds like the essence of bhakti. You mentioned that term earlier. Could you elaborate on what that means in the context of Tulsidas' philosophy?
Well, bhakti is often translated as devotion, but it's deeper than just a feeling. For Tulsidas, bhakti was a way of life, a complete surrender to the divine. He wasn't advocating for complex rituals or deep scholarship.
He believed in
The power of a pure heart and unwavering faith.
chanting Rama's name as a path to connect with the divine. So it's about that personal connection, that inner transformation. Through devotion, it's interesting how he emphasizes the pure heart over outward rituals.
And this resonated with people from all walks of life. His teachings were inclusive, making spirituality accessible to everyone, regardless of background or social standing. And he also highlighted the importance of dharma,
Meaning,
righteous living, through the character of Lord Rama.
so Ramcharitmanas is a guide to living a good life, a life of purpose, of ethical action. Inspired by Rama's example, are there any stories or legends surrounding Tulsidas that really illustrate his devotion or impact on people?
There are many. One that highlights his devotion is the story of his encounter with Hanuman. Tulsidas deeply desired to see Lord Rama, but he was granted the vision through Hanuman, disguised as an old man.
Wow.
It emphasizes the idea of divine grace and how true devotion can lead to unexpected blessings.
It's a reminder that sometimes the path to what we seek, it's revealed in unexpected ways, and it speaks to the power of faith and surrender.
Exactly. There's another fascinating story, though perhaps more legend than fact. It tells of Tulsidas being imprisoned by a Mughal emperor,
Uh-oh.
and it said that he summoned a whole army of monkeys to disrupt the palace, to force his release.
That's quite a story.
Whether factual or symbolic, it really captures the power and influence that Tulsidas held. He almost became a legendary figure himself.
It's a testament to how his life and work have captivated people's imaginations for centuries.
For sure. These stories passed down through generations. They speak to the enduring power of his teachings and how he touched the lives of so many.
These stories, wow, they really add in this dimension to how we see Tulsidas. We've talked about his life, his philosophy, and the impact of his work, but how did his teachings actually spread so widely? Especially back then, in the 16th century. Was it just because he used a wadi, or were there other things at play?
Well, the language was definitely key, yeah. Choosing a wadi, it allowed him to reach a much larger audience than if he had stuck with Sanskrit. Think of it this way. It's like choosing to share some important message, but you do it through like a popular blog post instead of like an academic journal.
Right, right. The reach is completely different. The impact, too.
Exactly.
So it's a really powerful example of how language can be a tool for social change, for breaking down those barriers and really democratizing knowledge. But language alone, I mean, it doesn't guarantee a lasting legacy, right? So what else do you think contributed to Tulsidas's impact and why it's lasted so long?
I think his genius as a storyteller often gets overlooked. He could weave these complex philosophical and spiritual ideas into the narrative of Ramcharitmanas. It's amazing. He brought the characters to life and their dilemmas. He made them relatable to people from all walks of life.
That makes sense. We're hardwired for stories. They stick with us, they teach us lessons, they shape how we see the world.
Yeah.
Tulsidas really understood the power of stories, and he used it so masterfully.
For sure. And it's this combination of things, the accessibility of the language, that power of the narrative, and then the depth of his spiritual message. I think that's why Ramcharitmanas continues to be read, recited, revered, even, all these centuries after it was written.
Wow. It's incredible to think about that his work, it's not stuck in some library, or just in academic circles. It's a living part of Indian culture, woven into everyday life.
Absolutely. People still recite verses from Ramcharitmanas daily, almost like prayers, and it's been adapted countless times, music, dance, theater, even film. It really speaks to its relevance and how it inspires people even today.
It's a bit like Shakespeare in the English-speaking world. You know how his plays are still reinterpreted and performed all these centuries later?
It is, yeah. It's a great analogy. They were both masters, language and storytelling. They both tapped into these universal themes that just transcend time and cultural boundaries.
That brings up a really important question. Why do you think Tulsidas' message still speaks to people today? What is it about his work that still captures our hearts and our minds?
I think, honestly, it has to do with his focus on bhakti, on devotion. He recognized, this basic human need to connect to something bigger than ourselves. And he offered a path. He showed a way to find that connection.
Through?
Faith and surrender to the divine.
Yeah. And that search for meaning and purpose, it's as relevant today as it was back then, maybe even more so.
I agree. With our, fast-paced, chaotic world.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just about devotion either, right? Because Tulsidas, he also stressed the importance of dharma, of living righteously. And that's another theme that I think resonates deeply today.
Right, exactly.
In a world that feels, well, morally ambiguous a lot of the time, where it feels like right and wrong are blurred, this call to live with integrity, with purpose, it's really appealing.
It really is. It gives us a framework, a set of values to guide us, as we try to navigate this complex life.
And finally, there's that message of simplicity and humility. In a culture that often says, worth is tied to material things, external achievements, Tulsidas reminds us that true greatness is different.
It's about the pure heart.
Right, and about selfless service.
A message that feels really timely. A counterpoint to all the noise and distractions that surround us.
It almost feels radical today, doesn't it? That we would find contentment and purpose, not in what we acquire, but in how we actually live, who we are.
It is. It really is. It's a testament to the power of Tulsidas' message. He understood something fundamental, something about the human condition. And it goes beyond, time and cultural context.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into Tulsidas' life and his legacy, what stands out as the most significant aspect of his work?
His ability to bridge the gap between ancient wisdom and everyday life. He took this story that could have felt distant, inaccessible even, and he made it relevant and meaningful for generations.
It's a powerful example for us all of how we can strive to make knowledge and wisdom more accessible, to bridge that gap between the past and the present.
Absolutely. Tulsidas reminds us, true knowledge shouldn't just be in books, or just for scholars. It should be shared, discussed, lived.
Before we move on, I want to share this really fascinating anecdote that I found about Tulsidas. It's about how he came to write Ramcharitmanas, and it really sheds light on, well, his humility and his devotion. So apparently Tulsidas, he actually started writing Ramcharitmanas in Sanskrit.
Oh, wow, the language of scholars and of the original Ramayana.
It seems like, kind of a natural choice. But then something really interesting happened.
What's that?
He switched to Awadhi, the language of the people.
I'm curious about this change. What prompted that shift?
Well, it's a great story. So it goes that some scholars, they actually criticized Tulsidas for not writing in Sanskrit.
Oh, interesting. They felt it wasn't, I don't know, proper to tell this sacred story in a more common language.
Yeah, exactly. It's a reminder of how, I don't know, how language can be tied to power and prestige.
Even though he was making it accessible to more people,
Right?
some people felt like he was diminishing its importance by choosing a wadi.
Exactly. But Tulsidas, devoted as he was, he prayed to Lord Rama for guidance. And, well, according to legend, Lord Rama himself appeared to Tulsidas
Oh, wow.
and advised him to write in the language of the people.
That's quite the divine intervention.
I know, right?
It really reinforces this idea that his mission, it was about making these teachings accessible to everyone.
Right. Not just to a select few. Imagine the courage that took to go against what everyone expected, to stand up to those scholars and just follow his heart. He could have given in to the pressure, kept writing in Sanskrit,
Yeah.
but he chose to trust his intuition, his devotion. And by doing so, he created something truly extraordinary.
I mean, his legacy proves that he made the right choice. Ramcharitmanas, it's a cornerstone of Indian culture, and largely because he decided to write in a language that everyone could understand.
It's a powerful example of how, breaking down those barriers, it can have such a wider impact.
Absolutely.
And it's a lesson for all of us, right? Sometimes we get so caught up in doing things the right way, following all those norms, and we miss those opportunities to connect with a wider audience. I think Tulsidas, he reminds us to think about how we can make our own knowledge and our passions more accessible.
Yeah, it makes me think about how technology is changing things today. How we share information. We have all these tools to make knowledge more accessible, to break down barriers, geographical, cultural. It's up to us to use them wisely.
It's exciting. It's a challenge, but one that I think Tulsidas would have loved.
For sure.
So as we wrap up our deep dive, what's one thing you hope our listeners will take away from exploring Tulsidas' life and work?
For me, it's the power of bhakti, that deep connection to something bigger than ourselves. It's a reminder. Spirituality, it's not limited to rituals and scriptures. It's a lived experience, a journey of the heart.
I love that. And I would add the importance of challenging those conventions, finding ways to make knowledge and wisdom, available to everyone. Tulsidas was a true pioneer in that regard, and his legacy continues to inspire, even all these centuries later.
To our listener, we really encourage you, explore Tulsidas' works. Discover the beauty and the wisdom of Ramcharitmanas for yourself. And as you go about your day, consider this. How can you embody the spirit of Tulsidas in your own life? How can you break down barriers, share your gifts, and make a positive impact on the world? The answers might surprise you.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We'll see you next time.